Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Human Side of Money, powered by RFG Advisory. Our guest today will be a familiar name to a lot of you. It's Meghaan Lurtz, back for the fifth time. For those of you that may not know Meghaan Lurtz at this point, maybe you're newer to the show, she's a partner at Shaping Wealth. She's a partner at Beyond the Plan. She's a regular contributor to the Kitsis platform on all things the human side of money. She is one of the foremost authorities, prominent voices when it comes to the human side of advice. And the reason why she's been on here so many times is not only because she has the knowledge and the background and the research, but she's one of the best in the business at helping advisors figure out how to apply these things day in and day out, which is the entire mission of this show. And today we're talking about an idea and a concept that if you get it right, will help you do goals-based planning better, helps you come up with better goals for your clients. It'll help you have better conversations with your clients. It'll help your clients live better, more meaningful, and fulfilling lives. And by the way, if you do it right, you're probably going to end up getting more referrals as a result as well. But we're talking about the idea of experimenting your way into better goals. Because the reality is that human beings are not very good at knowing what it is that we truly, really want. If you ask somebody, what are your goals? They're probably going to tell you the things that they think they're supposed to say, because we don't sit around thinking often about what are my goals truly. And as research says, we're actually bad predictors of our future self. So we like to think that we know what we're going to want 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road. But the reality is we change more than we ever expect. So the concept here is to experiment your way into better goals by, instead of trying to guess what it is that you like and guess what it is that you want to do, you run little tests to figure it out. If you have a client that says they want to retire and spend 3 months in Italy, before they make that big bet and take that guess that they're going to want to spend 3 months in Italy, find a way to run a test to figure out, is it that they really want to go to Italy? Is there something else about it that you can replicate differently? So Meghaan and I are going to talk about the psychology of this concept, the benefits of it. And then, of course, we're going to get into a 4-step process that she's designed so that you can use this concept of experimenting in both discovery meetings, but also review meetings, where you first create, then you participate, then you debrief, and then you align and make adjustments so you can have better goals and live a better life. And yes, by the way, like I said earlier, you're also going to have better conversations with your clients. And then at the end, we also say, okay, let's flip this a little bit and talk about this idea, not only for the client experience, but what advisors can know, what they need to know, and how they can utilize it from a marketing perspective. How can you ramp up your marketing efforts by thinking through it through the lens of experimenting rather than just a straight strategy that you have to stick to? So whether you want to help clients create better goals, live more meaningful lives, have better conversations, get more referrals, or you want to ramp up your marketing efforts, you have to understand this experimentation concept so you can experiment your way to success. All right. Without further ado, enjoy this conversation with Dr. Meghaan Lurtz.
Welcome to the Human Side of Money, a show dedicated to equipping financial advisors with the skill set required to work with emotional human beings on the emotionally charged topic of money. You'll get practical tips and insights on applying behavioral finance into your practice from conversations with fellow advisors, industry consultants, and experts in the fields of behavior, psychology, communication, and more. Now here's your host, Brendan Frazier.
Meghaan Lurtz, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Episode 5 for you, 5th time. And what normally happens, yeah, believe it or not, you at number 3, you made the proclamation that you're like the Jordan of the podcast. Here you are at 5. You need one more to get to 6 to tie him. But what normally happens, what's happened in the past, and it happened again, was I sit there and I go, no, we need to wait a little bit longer. It's been too long. Now, granted, it's been over a year, but then you put something out into the world and I read it and it aligns with something I'm also fascinated by. And it's so good that I go, no, we can't wait. We got to bring her back on. We got to dive into it. And so this time, believe it or not, you don't know this, but back at the end of December, end of last year, 2025, I put out the best of 2025 episode where I go back through every episode from the previous year and pull out wisdom, insight, nuggets, practical ideas from each episode so that you can basically just kind of recaps the year. And in that episode, as I'm going back through and recapping, I make this claim, I make this statement that says, as I think about it from these conversations I had this year, I think one of the themes that stuck with me the most or one of the things that I've like dove into more and started to embrace more is this idea of experiments and experimenting your way to figuring out the things that you want to do, the things that are important to you. And it started with a guy who was retired, and he was like, I need to find meaning. And he was like, it felt overwhelming to sit there and go, what is meaningful to me and what can I do to provide meaning? And he said, I just tried a bunch of different things and then figured out what worked for me. And I was just kind of stuck down that path. And I remember that conversation, and the book Tiny Experiments came out last year, which we were just talking about, by Anne-Laure LeCunte. And so I don't know why, but it was that book, a couple podcast interviews, and then you wrote an article on it. And it just felt like the stars were aligned that we needed to have you back to talk about it. So I think the best place to start is for you to tell the story of how experiments were introduced into your life. And I think that'll sort of set the scene or the foundation to give everybody an idea of what we mean when we say experiments.
Yeah. So this is kind of a weird story. It's a very personal story. So at the time, I was living in California. I was 26, 27. And I had been dating my then very long time, 2.5-year boyfriend, Justin, now my husband. And I went to my therapist's office and I said, I have to break up with my boyfriend. And she was like, why? Like you love him, right? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, well, I don't understand. And I was like, look, I really can't take any more uncertainty in my life right now. Like what if we start dating or continue to date, or we get married and then we have to get a divorce, or, like what if, he dies, or there could be so many horrible things, that happen. And I'm just not sure that they tell you, I remember telling her this, they tell you in every other place in your life that you should not put all your eggs in one basket. But when it comes to love, it's just like, woo, free, just throw it out, go for it.
Don't screw it up.
I just think that's crazy, And so I was like, I just can't reconcile how I feel the uncertainty and magnitude of this relationship. And so I just think I need to end it. And she goes, well, can I offer something else? As a good therapist would, not like, Meghan, you're nuts. Here's a different idea. Can I offer something else? And I was like, yeah, sure. She was great. I should probably preface that she had outlived 3 husbands. She had been an engineer before she became a therapist. So super interesting background, very logical thinker. She was probably 6'2", 6'3", I bet. She was wafy. She was just such an interesting looking person, and also just an incredibly interesting person.
And the last thing that you picture when you think about a therapist is a 6'2", 6'3" female engineer.
Yeah. Just tall, thin. She was elegant, but also kind of scary. And she was just cool, man. She was cool. And so anyway, she says, can I offer something else? And I was like, yeah, sure. She goes, well, what if she knew me by this point, and she knew that I really, I was studying, I was in school for my master's at this point, and she leaned into the fact that I wanted to be a researcher. And she's like, what if you think of this as research, let's think of it like an experiment. If it fails, if it all goes to hell, you're right. That's not going to feel good, but you're going to learn something. And wouldn't that be valuable? That is something that actually you value above anything else, Meghan. You value learning, and also if you stay together, think of all the things that you will learn for that. You'll learn about marriage. You'll learn about kids. You'll learn about, having a long-term relationship, and that too has value. So before you just end this and don't even try the experiment, how about you just think of it as an experiment? And so, I can certainly say that my marriage, is 13 years strong. We've got a long running experiment going on, and so far so good. But that was my first interaction, and from that moment, from that time being with her in that office, I have used that in just about every place in my life. I remember working at the Kids' platform, right? Working for Michael, writing quizzes and things like this. And he was talking about like, because at the time there was only like 3 of us, so it was Michael was writing a lot. We did have some guest authors, but it was a Wild West. We were all very busy. And I said to him, I could write. And he goes, do you want to write? And I go, well, I don't know, I could. And he goes, all right, start writing 18 articles a year. And in my mind, I was like, well, this will be an experiment. And then like, that's how the speaking thing actually came to be as well. I told Michael one day, I was like, I think I could speak. And he goes, do you want to speak? As most conversations with Michael and I go, I ask something, he asks something in return, and we kind of go back and forth for a minute. But he was like, well, if you want to. But it was just like, I think I could do this. What's the worst that's going to happen? I'm a teacher. I teach all the time anyway. It can't be way different from that. That this seems like a relatively safe experiment. And through every move, I've been in the military, through the work that, that we do at Shaping Wealth, through my work as a researcher, now doing some fun stuff with Ashley, like so much of my personal life and so much of my professional life has truly just been, well, let's see how this experiment goes, and trying to figure out, experiment my way to what do I enjoy? What am I good at? Yeah. Instead of just guessing.
Okay, I will say this. When you're telling the story about your now husband and your therapist telling you to experiment, I thought the experiment was going to be, okay, like break up for 7 days. Say, hey, my therapist said we need to try breaking up for 7 days and seeing what happened. But you're saying the experiment was stick together, like stay together, and then look at that as an experiment that will ultimately something you can learn from, that will provide you insight, kind of like so that your research brain goes, okay, well, no matter what, this is an experiment. If we stay together, I can learn from it. It's like my own little research project where I'll learn certain things and I'll be better off because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Which you're right. I mean, is probably a different way to frame it, but doing that, allowed me to stay in sort of the experimental mindset. And then that way the judgment of like how it went or didn't go, at that point was almost like put off.
Yeah.
To say to like, okay, I'm going to have to break up and see how that feels, for 7 days. That, I probably would argue that's not going to give me a very good sense. Like if I'm going to break up, I'm going to, again, at the time I was living in California, I probably would have been like, I'm going to move to Spain, and I would have done something like in addition to. And so she was pretty smart in just saying, that this in and of itself, like, is an experiment, and you can figure out, whatever happens in the end, because it was the uncertainty of how it would end or not, that was keeping me frozen in terms of like being able to make a decision and really understand what would and would not make me happy.
Okay.
And so,
so I want to sit on the idea of experiments and the importance of it and why they're effective. And then we're going to get into how to do this with clients, how to benefit your clients with this concept. But let's use the one with Michael on the Kitsis platform, the example you gave there, where you said you went to Michael and you're like, hey, I think I want to write. And he's like, do you want to write? And you're like, well, okay, let's experiment my way into figuring out if I want to write. Well, you then said that he said, yeah, all right, why don't you write 18 articles a year? To me, that doesn't sound like an experiment. That sounds more like a full-time commitment. So what I'm wondering is, I guess in my mind, this may not be true, is what I'm putting out there. In my mind, the thing that I think about when I think experiment is like, let's do a short, not big time commitment, just dip the toe in the water, or just do like a mini version of it and see how it goes before we do it. So how do you think through, like, what's the difference between, like, is 18 articles an experiment, or is there something like, where do we draw the line between small?
No, Michael like definitely doubled down on the challenge. All right. And so like in my mind and how I felt at that time was that if I start writing and I don't like it, or if I start writing and it's not working, I don't have to do it anymore. But certainly it did work. And, I continued to write 18 for quite a few many years. But yeah, like I knew at any time that Michael probably wasn't going to freak out. I mean, because I wasn't writing, and then I was writing at least some. So, if I stopped again, I didn't think that it was that big of a deal, but it certainly was something I wanted to try. And we just doubled down.
Because when we think about the reason why this concept works, or this idea works, I think part of it is because it frees you up mentally to go, okay, this isn't an irreversible decision that I'm making.
Right.
I can do this, and I'm not committed to it forever, right? Like and one of the examples you gave in the article that you wrote that came from the Tiny Experiments book is, so instead of saying like, all right, I'm going to write a book this year, you would instead say, I'm going to write for 15 minutes every morning for 30 days, and then see how that goes, and then step back and evaluate. Which to me, it's like, you're not going to write 18 articles, but maybe you say, all right, I'm going to write an article and see how it goes, see how I like it. But that's part of and maybe you can articulate this better than me, but part of the reason why this idea or this concept works is we're hesitant to make big moves and big commitments, right? But
yes.
But it's a
yes. We kind of need some takesy backsies, if you will.
Yeah.
And you're right. And so, okay, I should probably preface that when we said that, when Michael and I agreed that I was going to start writing a whole bunch, I was already writing research articles. Like, it was not a question for me of could I write long form. It was not a question for me of could I write on this topic. In my mind, it was more like, could I write consistently? Because I wasn't necessarily doing that. And turns out I can. And I want to say in the first year, Michael may have said like, all right, 10. And then we moved up to like 15. And then it was 18 or something like that. If I remember, it wasn't quite 18 right off the bat. But you are correct. Maybe my examples are not super wonderful.
Well, it actually provided a great way to frame the benefit. Like 18 is probably a big commitment, but you could also make it smaller. Anyways, keep going.
Right. And I think you're doing it to try to, because at that time I was working at the Kids' platform. It's not like I needed to do anything else. I had a job there, but I was like, is this something that I want to do? Like, do I want to write? Do I want to put more of my ideas out there? Do I think that this is important? Do I think that I will enjoy not only putting the ideas out, but potentially receiving accolades for that, or helping to inform, the industry that we work in? I didn't know any of that at that point. And the only way to find out, was to do it, and sort of see what came back. And I think that just that practice of, as you said, that there is a small enough thing that you can do that you don't get stuck. And so, I myself, like right now, I would love to write a book, but I've certainly written long form, but I've never written like War and Peace long form. Okay. And so instead, what I do is every month I write an article on my Less Lonely Money Substack, and I continue to write for the Kids' platform and things like that. But I am trying to write consistently in a way that feels like I can, and do I have enough things to say, for a book, without having to commit to a book. Cause I just don't think I would get it. Done. But I don't mind doing something every month. I enjoy it. And I think that the experiments, work in the same way. And we haven't really talked about the underlying research, which I think is important to why this is important. So in financial planning, like maybe, I don't know how many years ago it was, but there was like this move from investment focused financial planning, if you will, to goals based financial planning. Like we're not just trying to chase a return or something like that. We're trying to get you this house that you want, or, retire in this particular way. And that's great. I like the sentiment of that. I'm sure that it has helped any number of financial planners to have better conversations, more meaningful conversations, work towards more meaningful goals.
It's better than what the alternative was at the time, sort of thing, right? Like it was a step up. It was an upgrade compared to, hey, let's just invest your money and hopefully get a good return, and compare it to the benchmark. It gave you another lens through which to evaluate, like, what are we working towards and how are we doing?
Right. And so I think it's a valuable conversation, but it sits in juxtaposition to a bunch of research that says people are actually pretty bad at doing that. Like we are poor future affect forecasters. We are bad at guessing what will make us happy or sad in the future. And so it's like we sit down with people and we say, hey, in 20 years from now or 15 years from now, I honestly think people have a really hard time doing anything more than maybe 2 years out. Just because life can change so much. Your health can change, where you live can change, your kids change, your partner changes, whatever. There's just so much that you can't control. That I think we have to have goals, and like head in a direction. But at the same time, if we get so tied to that, it almost becomes like an anchoring bias. We've said this and now we can't change it, or we're recognizing things and we're recognizing this isn't the right way, but we don't know how to stop.
Yeah, right. To that point, what I would say is when I think about people ask me all the time, like, are you going to write a book? Are you going to write a book? You should write a book. And like, to me, the main reason I hesitate is it's like, that's a huge commitment. And I don't want to get locked in on that commitment and then either have to pivot or need to pivot, but feel so anchored in it and like so invested in it that I'm missing other opportunities because I'm like, I got to finish the book. Right. And so that's where, to your point, it's like, that's one of the fears and books just one of the examples. Right. But that's why I like what you said, which is, okay, maybe I don't have to write a book, but what if I just put my thoughts on paper once a month? Just started like heading that direction. And if I have to pivot, it doesn't blow up the idea of a book. It just means that I have this repository of my knowledge online somewhere and I'm not posting anymore, but I'm not a failure because I didn't get a book out. Hey everybody, Brendan again. Hope you're enjoying this conversation so far with Meghaan Lurtz on the power of experiments. As you heard me mention to her earlier, this is an idea and a concept that I've been fascinated by and trying out for the better part of probably over a year now. And so I figured what I would do is I would offer an experiment to anybody out there who's trying to grow but not growing in the way that they want to. So what we know about advisor growth is that the number one barrier to growth is time. Not enough time to spend on the things that actually drive the growth that you want. So if you feel like that's the case for you, if you go, hey, you know what, I feel like if I had more time, I could probably grow more than I am now, or I could probably do more things than I'm doing now. And I walk into this to-do list every day and it just feels like I'm always reacting to things. Time's flying by. I don't have time to do the things that I want or need to be doing. Let's try an experiment. Try to figure out one thing you can do next week to improve the use of your time in your daily architecture. So for me, one of the things I heard at one point was, hey, Brendan, what you should do is try a Monday admin day. And so use that day as the day where you do admin tasks, but you also spend time planning and prepping for the week and knocking off other things that need to be done. You're not going to be in meetings. You're not going to be doing other certain things, but that's your day to get planned, prepped, and warmed up for the week. And I remember first thinking, well, there's no way I could do that. How could I feel like I'd be losing an entire day. This is probably 5 or 6 years ago. And the person said to me, they said, hey, Brendan, why don't you just give it a shot for a week and see what happens? So I tried it for a week. Haven't looked back since then. It was the power of an experiment, and it's changed the trajectory of how I work and my weeks ever since. So here's what you do. If you're sitting there thinking, okay, I want more time, I need to experiment, but what do I do? We created a guide for you on how to go from being reactive to intentional. And in that guide, there are some very specific ways that you can optimize your time in your daily architecture to get more time to do the things that you want to be doing and need to be doing to grow the firm in the way that you want to. And so if you want some ideas that you could try testing and experimenting with, go to the show notes. In the show notes, there's going to be a link in there to download the guide called From Reactive to Intentional. And you can find find an experiment to test a new way that you can work the same amount without adding more hours and still get the growth that you're looking for. Hope it helps. Now let's get back to the show.
Absolutely. I think that there is not getting tied to something that we're not actually quite sure about. And the other part of this is like, okay, then, but then what can we be sure about? What can we actually know?
Right.
And I think that's where the experiments matter. And so again, we have these clients that say things like, well, I want to, like my favorite example to use is like, I want to spend 3 months a year in Europe. And to those people that say that, I'm always like, okay, so like how long have you actually been in Europe?
They're like, well, I took a week-long vacation like 20 years ago and we loved it.
Yeah. No, man. And so in those instances, it's like, okay, fine, that's the goal, 3 months. But what we're going to experiment with between now and then is where do you actually want to go? Like I hear you say France. France is not a big place, but it's got, more than one city. And so like, what if we went to a few different, like we chose a different city every year for the next 5 years. And let's say that, I like that you enjoyed being there for a week, but there's also this thing called like the peak end rule that says that, sometimes if we spend longer doing something, that doesn't always make it better. So how about, you've been going for a week, that's good. How about we go for 2 weeks? And then when you get back, let's talk about it. Like, how was it? Was it the place that you didn't like? Maybe you typically go to Paris and this time you went to, I don't know, Marseille or something like that, and you just didn't like it as much. Okay. Or was it, you decided that it was just too long? Parisian hotels, in my opinion, have horrible beds. And so you decided that after a week, there just wasn't enough wine to like make that okay. And so you're just, now that a week is actually enough, and that probably trying to get to that 3 months, that doesn't have to be a reality. You can actually do something that you enjoy. Maybe spend a week in Portugal, maybe spend a week in France, and maybe spend a week in Germany. Take 3 trips in a year, not just one really long trip. And you might find that you enjoy it a lot more. But you have to experiment your way to what actually makes you happy, to what actually works. And I don't know that, certainly financial planners in the way that, and as lovely as financial planning software is, we can run, we can make these little tweaks and do kinds of different things to the plan all the time. And that's great. We don't have to wait, a month to decide, okay, your plan could support this or your plan can't. But even as a financial planner, trying to think that someone's going to spend 3 months out of the country, what that would cost versus, 3 trips throughout the year, every year, that these are probably going to be a little bit different.
All because they went to Europe once and thought to themselves, I think it'd be cool to be there for 3 months. And they think that that's what they would like. And you know what? By the way, maybe it is. Right? Maybe that is.
Maybe
right? But that's a pretty big guess, pretty big bet to make on something that you don't really know. Right? In the article that you wrote, when you mentioned this example of going to Europe, you also had a good example too of where you go and you experiment, you go on a 2-week trip, and then you find out that what you love the most about the trip wasn't being in, I guess Europe or Italy or whatever it was. It was the cooking classes.
Yeah.
And then you go, you find that out. And so you go, that was fun. I enjoyed that. And so then you come back and you can do regular cooking classes in your own, in your community. Right. And it's a much less expensive way to still, I don't know if I'd say meet the same need, right? But like get the same enjoyment.
It could be. If it ended up being about community, if it ended up being about, learning a new skill, there could absolutely, you may still, as a person that likes to cook and likes to cook in community, want to go to a different country every year and take a cooking class. But again, that's a very different goal from wanting to go and spend 3 months somewhere. There are so many things that we can learn in just being able to take the time to do the experiment. And this is the part that, for financial planners, and also I guess for just other humans listening to this, that like you do the experiment, but then you really have to come back and like debrief it, in a paper, like in a research paper, there's outcomes and conclusions. So there's like what happened, and then like, what does this mean? And you have to have that sort of reflective time, to say, okay, I enjoyed this. I didn't actually enjoy this. This was okay. I would do this again. I would maybe do this again, but only if we went here. Like there needs to be that time of kind of like breaking it down about like what was good and what was not so good. So that then your next experiment, can use those pieces. Like perhaps in the cooking example, maybe you did, take then a cooking class here in your local community and you decide, yeah, that's not the same, okay, fine. But like now that cooking was fun in Italy, cooking was less fun here. So is it really about cooking in Italy, or maybe now we just need to do a cooking class in Spain? Like what is it? Like what is the thing that's really bringing the joy? And it's okay to fail, in the sense it's okay to have the experiment go wrong, and that you still learn something along the way. These are hopefully where you can design them in such a way. The Tiny Experiments book goes into this in great detail, that these are low stakes trials. Like it's fine if it doesn't work, or if it does work. The whole point is that we're just trying to learn something about what actually makes us happy.
Failure's not, the magnitude of failure is not of epic proportions, right? Failure isn't like your life is completely uprooted and disrupted. Failure is it's minimal, it's minimized, right? It's like, okay, you spent one night and $100 and you figured out that you don't like going to operas. Okay, and maybe that's more than $100. I don't know. But like the point is, it's like, but you have to reframe it and go, I mean, even then it's like, okay, failure. Yeah, I suppose. But if you look at it the right way, you say, well, but that was still informative, right? In fact, I'm going to be better off because of this. So failure, yes, but ultimately no. Right. Yeah.
Right. I consider it a failure if we wait 5 years, 10 years, retire, go to Italy, enjoy the first week, hate the next, 8 weeks, get back and feel like I'm never doing this again. Like to me, and then feel that question of like, well, what am I going to do now? Like the gentleman that you were talking to, that like, where am I supposed to find meaning now? Like we don't want to wait with all of our eggs in one basket about the meaning, about the connection, about what we think we're going to like, what we think we're not going to like. And goals are good. In financial planning, they tend to be very big. Sometimes they're even flowery and like, oh, well, I want, financial freedom. Okay. Like that is a good goal. But like, what does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we experiment into like some actual tangible ideas of what it means and feels like to live with financial freedom?
So I think this is actually a good point to introduce or make the connection between vision, experiments, and goals. So we've talked about goals, and I think most people get the idea of goals, right? We know what financial goals are. We talk about them. Most people do them. And I always say, like, if you're working with a human being to help them use their money to do something with it, ultimately, like that, there's a goal, right? Like everybody's doing goals-based planning and investment to some degree. But we've talked about experiments now too, right? And the power of experimenting. And the way you put it, the way you lay it out is, it's like you've got vision, you've got experiments, and you have goals. So can you talk us through how you see those three, the role they each play, and how they're connected when you're, let's say probably in a discovery meeting with a prospective client, for example?
Yeah. So this too gets a little, not quite technical, but like dorky nerd stuff.
The good news though, and why you're here for the fifth time, is that you do a good job of making dorky nerd stuff like insightful and like somewhat enjoyable. But in fact, although it is kind of dorky nerd stuff, but it's also really important to understand.
I think
if you want to like help, like do the best work you can for your clients, help them live their best lives. And also, by the way, just have better conversations, right? And have clients that come back that are like, thanks, I would have never done that if it weren't for you. Like it's a pretty important framework to understand, I think. So.
Yeah. And I will say, or I want to call out, I have two practitioner friends, that have both informed some of my thinking on this. So one of them is Billy Spencer. He is a financial planner. And the other one is Brendan Pheasant, who is also a financial planner, but he is getting his PhD at Tech, which we don't talk about that because he's not getting it at Kansas State. But
he has a great first name, at least. So he's got that coming from
him. He does. And so I just think it's in talking with them and them working as practitioners and them both being brilliant thinkers, some of this has like emerged more fully for me. And so the vision thing, there's a researcher called Richard Boyatzis. He has what's called the intentional change theory model. And in that, he talks about that there's like negative networks and positive networks. And when we're trying to get people to change, and go towards something, have motivation for stuff, we have to make sure that their positive networks, are online and not their negative ones. And, I think about this a lot in financial planning, and I think we ask questions like, so, tell me how much you've saved for retirement. And we mean it in like the nicest sense. We mean it so optimistically, like we're just trying to find out where they are.
Well, it's an important data point to be able to work with somebody to be 100%. Able to retire. Right. Yeah.
But when we say this, because there is a power dynamic in the room, because you are the professional and you're asking now this question, our brains automatically assume that if we're asked a question, that there's some sort of a right answer. And we start to get nervous, whether you intend that to happen or not, it does happen. And so they may think like, well, okay, I've got, $3 million, but is that enough? Or is that too much? I don't know what people think. And so, but they're thinking something. And once you kind of get somebody going, this is like a negative neural network, like we're going to be nervous. We're going to be a little bit scared. We're going to be like, on edge, maybe, and we're going to probably feel defensive, things like that. And not that we're going to lie. And again, not that we're doing this and making them feel deeply uncomfortable. I don't think that most financial planning probably wouldn't exist if people felt so unbelievably uncomfortable that they all left the first meeting with a financial planner and thought, well, I'm never doing that again, So, but I still think that we could do more to help people feel more comfortable. And this idea of vision, that like people need to feel that they are working towards something, usually bigger than themselves or bigger than what's currently going on right now. And much of this, again, this is coming from Dr. Boyatzis' work, but you see the same thing in the trans-theoretical model of change, that people need to feel that this is a good idea, that this is important, that this helps other people, that this helps them, before they do the thing. You also see this same sort of behavior, even in like positive psychology, that, like how important it is to feel connected, to something bigger than ourselves. And so to me, the fact that we see it again and again in some of these very important theories related to how people change, and really importantly, how people grow and how they become, like related to the positive psychology movement, and like not just survive, but how do we thrive? That this idea of vision, needing a bigger picture for the life that you want to live. You have to set the stage a little bit as the financial planner and say, hey, I'm going to ask you some questions that I've maybe never asked you before, or that nobody's ever asked you before. We're going to think, really big, about your life and what it is that you want. And, I'm going to ask you things like about your meeting and about why, and like, what you think about when you think about 10 years from now and 20 years from now. And I want you to dream big, you set that stage, but then doing that, starting with vision, getting somebody to talk about like what actually excites them, what inspires them, what makes them feel connected. If we go there and then we say, cool, those are amazing things that you want to feel, amazing things that you want to do, amazing things that you want to be. Let's try some of them. Like we can turn those into goals in one way, shape, or form, but we can also experiment towards them. Like we can try different things, and make sure that like this vision, that it has pieces that are actually real, as a part of it, and not just these big flowery ideas, but that as we move closer to it and it becomes more clear, that we're then going towards the things that actually make us happy. We're doing more of the things that actually build community and engagement and positive emotions and things. And
as you were talking, I was thinking too about how, or this idea of vision is, if you look at companies, organizations, right, they set first like their mission and their vision, right, to get everybody rallied around like the cause that they're working towards. As I'm sitting here thinking through it, though, the way I think you mentioned in the article, the way that I think through it as well, but tell me if this is not right, is the goals are sort of like what you want to do. They're what you're going to do, but the vision is tied a little bit more directly into why you're doing it. Like the vision is your why, your emotional reason, your inspiration, and then the goal is sort of like the manifestation of it. Or the vision drives the goal, and the goal is what you're going to do. So if you were to say like, oh yeah, my vision or my why with money is to give charitably to others in need and use it as a way to build and foster community. And it's like, okay, that's what you want. That's what you want to use your money for. That's what you get excited about. Then a goal to do that could be, we want to, and this is an example actually that came from a guest on the podcast, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. The goal would be to build the patio on your back deck that you've been thinking about for years, because then you can invite friends over to have meals. You can have family over to celebrate birthdays, and it's a way to spend more time in community. So now you're using your money to fulfill the vision. As I hear you talk, what I think there is, you better be sure that you really like nice patios and having people over at your house all the time. Otherwise, that's not going to be a great way to fulfill the vision. And so you sit there and you're like, okay, maybe before we throw that 50 grand into the renovation, right? Let's do a little test and see how much we like hosting people and look at it that way. So, and so I think it flows down that way where you go, all right, if my vision is this, I want to figure out how to manifest it and to bring it to life without guessing. I can experiment my way into figuring it out. I think it also, and I think you're saying this too, I think it works back up the chain the other way, where I think I know what's meaningful and important to me. But again, we're not great at knowing ourselves and who we're going to be in the future. And so it's like, experimenting also probably helps inform the things that are important, my vision to a certain degree too. So it kind of sits there. It's like vision's at the top, experiments in the middle, goals are at the bottom. And it's like those experiments sit right there in the, this is where, we are on YouTube now, but it needs to be better. If we could, it'd be like, they'd have a graph up there and it would show this instead of people trying to visualize it.
It would be cool if this could be done in a picture. I think that would be very, very, sometimes you ask like what should be in a poster, like somehow we should figure out how to draw this visually and it should be a poster.
Yeah. I'm going to ChatGPT image creator.
It's just, it's this idea that the image though can be kind of nebulous, like or the vision.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's like, I want to be part of my community. Hell yeah. Like that's a great vision to have. That is motivating. But, the goal could be, I want to give so much to charity. I want to host events and I want to volunteer. Okay. So then different things that we could experiment with. Okay. Well, is there different charity? Like, do you want to try a couple charities, and see which one you actually like? Yeah,
that's a really good example, right?
You want to think about in terms of, being involved in your community. Again, you could have people over, but maybe you also rent out a space and have people over there. And so you're good with people, but people in your house, if you're me, people in my house, like, no. But people at a different location where I don't have to clean it up and don't worry about my things getting broken, I'm okay with it. And then, but like, you don't know, you have these ideas in your head and then they happen and you're like, but I learned something, and so that's all we want. We don't want people to feel, or I don't want people to feel that, they've set this goal and now they have to do it, or that this vision is so nebulous that they're not quite sure like what it really means. And I think that idea of experiments, kind of being this two-way dialogue that, as you were describing, up and down the chain, can really help people to figure out, to codify, to play with in, again, low stakes environments, just to really figure out like what works for you.
As you were talking, I love this example you brought up because it took me back to one of the first clients that I ever worked with, who was also awesome, one of the best clients. Probably part of the reason I stayed in the business, because I was like, man, if everybody's like this guy, this is going to be great. Turns out it wasn't the case. But I remember we were sitting down looking at his financial plan, and he had a lot of money, and based on the projections, he was going to have money left over even after his wife died. He's going to be able to give. And so he said it was important for him to to give back, to give to charities. And I'm sitting there like, okay, yeah, I've read about this, I've heard about this. Of course, you want to give. And so then I sat there. I'm like, all right, but where do you want to give? I didn't know what I was doing really. So I'm like, well, okay, well, who are you going to give to? He's like, well, I don't really know. And I was like, I feel like a lot of people fall in this boat where they go, I'm going to give and it's the right thing to do. And then you sit down, you're like, okay, so if you had to give, exactly is it going and to who do you want to give it to? And most people kind of stop there. Right. And so I love this idea of people that, and now you have some people that are like, this is my cause and this is where I give.
Yeah.
But
sure.
you also have people that, they go, I want to give. And then they go, I want to give to the Red Cross because it's like the one thing that they see it on TV all the time, which is just good marketing by the Red Cross, but it's not intentional. And so I kind of wish if I'd gone back in time, I kind of wish I would have said like, all right, let's do a little experiment here. Right. And just see like maybe if it's your money, great, but it could be your time. Like pick like 3 causes that you feel passionate about and maybe go out and take a weekend and go serve and like be a part of it and see how that goes. See what you think, right? Or if you want to give money, like give money and see is that really somebody. But it's a way to like go from I want to give. I don't know where to experimenting your way into making it more intentional. I guess is the word that keeps coming to mind.
Yeah, more concrete, more intentional, more of what brings you actual joy.
Yeah.
You know, like I think that is the bigger thing that like we don't want to get, you know, to our retirement years, or just at a time when we feel like maybe we have more choice and not know what to choose. And I think that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And again, not because of anything. I mean, like retirement is a relatively new phenomenon, you know, and like how to do that well. I just think we really struggle with that. And again, this is probably going to like take this conversation a little bit morbid, which is not my intention, but you know, like when we are aging, I'm going to be 42 this year. And I can definitely tell you that a lot of me died at 40. I do not feel the same as when I was 35.
Somebody else just said that
and
yesterday.
I've heard that a lot of me died at 40, but I've also heard that a lot more of me is going to die around 70. And even though I knew this, I mean, I'd read the research that like things just kind of start to slow down, especially for women at 40. I was like, that's not going to be me.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, it is me. And now I have to think about, you know, I go to the gym different. I have to eat different. But if you would have asked me that, you know, like 3 years ago when I was 39 and living large, like, no, like I wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah.
And so and now, you know, what I do and how I take care of myself is different. And when we go through these like decades, but even when we go through like, again, a 5-year period, it is amazing how much people change and like what possibly they wanted to do, you know, what they think they should do going forward. You know, they may find that they have additional things that they want to give to or try, like, you know, and all of this is fine. And setting things up, you know, as the financial planner, being able to offer and encourage, you know, using that language. Well, let's just experiment a little bit. Or what if we thought about this as like an experiment? What if you know, tried it like this and like that? It is so freeing for people and it becomes kind of fun. You know, like you can also get people to spend more in retirement using this. You know, like there are the people that are just nervous to spend for any number of completely valid reasons. And you're never going to get them to go, you know, from the $4,000 or $5,000 a month that they're spending to the $20,000 that they could by just saying, here's $20,000, you can do it. But if you say, look, for the next 3 months, just 3 months, I'm going to put the full $20,000 into your account. And I want you to spend every dollar. Like I want you to keep, you know, a journal of the things that you're spending money on. And at the end of the 3 months, or we can even do it once a month, I want you to come in and tell me about what you actually enjoyed spending money on and what by the end of the month just felt like you were burning cash to burn cash. You know, like what felt superfluous, what felt fun. And we're going to do it for 3 months. After 3 months, I won't make you do it anymore. We can go back to like whatever you want to do, but we're going to try it. And we're going to try to learn something as we're doing it. And so in this process, people will find out that, oh, well, you know, I took my grandkids out to lunch like 7 times because I just like did not know what to do with all this money. And I found that, you know, I actually really, really kind of like taking those little rats out. And so it's like, but now they may not do it 7 times, but even if they did it 3 or 4, you know, like they will spend more of the money and they will end up spending the money on things that actually matter, on things that actually bring them joy, because you have taken the time to sort of like do the mini research project of what are you spending on and what makes you happy.
Okay, so this is good. You just gave a great example of where it plays out with clients and when advisors are working with their clients, and it's. I've got good news. You actually have we can systematize it or turn it into a process. You have 4 steps that go into the process to being able to do this so that advisors can use it with their clients. So let's go through those and think through. So for anybody that's thinking like, okay, get the concept, like the concept, definitely powerful. Help me think through how I'm going to actually go about doing it and through this process. Let's roll through it.
So set a time-bound test or a number-bound
the first
test.
Step is create.
Create. Yeah. So you're going to create the test. And so, you're going to try X for Y period of time. I'm going to give you this 20 grand a month for 3 months. The next thing is participate. Like more than anything, you want to encourage full engagement. I use the example of, getting some person to spend 20 grand a month. But like, again, if this people in retirement, maybe they're thinking about, again, going to Europe or something like that. And they're like, well, I don't want to buy the first class tickets, or, well, I'm not going to stay at the Ritz. Like, maybe I won't get the bag, whatever they want. Just be like, look, I'm signing off. Here's your $40,000 check. Go hog wild. Like, do all of the things. So get them to fully engage, because you're like, look, you just have to do it once. I just want you to go on this trip and blow it all. Only got to do it once. And then you want them to feel. We're not trying to get them to hedge, like we don't, well, maybe I can, maybe I can't. No, like we just want it to be full blown, full on, go for it. So create, participate. Next, debrief. When they get back from doing this thing, or after the 3 months are up, or they took the cooking class, here in the US, again, it doesn't always have to be about like spending more money. Sometimes it can just be about doing a thing. You want to capture those learnings, and you want to capture them relatively soon after. Like you don't want to wait necessarily until your next review meeting, which could be 3, 4, 6 months later. And it doesn't always have to be a full-on meeting. Like just take them to dinner. Like, woo, you're back from Paris. Let's go. Let's talk about it, And so take them to dinner and ask them tons and tons of questions about their experience, what they liked, how it was. Get them to reflect. This actually has 2 benefits. One, you're going to have the data, for what actually made them happy. And people love reflective happiness exercises. My you can be at the T-Swift conference, I always say concert, T-Swift concert, and like screaming and singing and, wearing all the bands on your arms and things. But then you get back and you're like, your friend's like, how was the T-Swift concert? And you immediately go back to that moment, and you're like, we were screaming and we were dancing, and I had 1,000 bracelets on, and people love it, so you are going to get the information, get them to debrief all that you can, and recognize that in and of itself is just a lovely experience, and getting to tell you about their cool thing is a cool moment. The last part is align. Decide what, if anything, you want to repeat, or what's going to evolve into a new goal. So, like the experiments don't have to stop. You can kind of continue on with the next one. They don't always have to be as elaborate or anything like that, but just that, we want to tinker. We want to encourage this sort of tinkering behavior. We want to encourage and support our clients in being brave and empowered to try new things and spend their money and think more holistically and connectedly, about the choices connectedly. That's not a word.
It is now.
It's now in a more connected way, with their money, and how it is or is not in alignment with their life and the goals that they have set out to achieve.
Before we'll go a little bit into each of those, I have a question for a couple of them. What comes to mind as like the best times to be thinking through experiments, or maybe where experiments are really helpful and beneficial? I know you gave probably the best example, a classic example of the client that is underspending, right? And we also talked about charitable giving as a scenario where that could happen. Do any other client situations come to mind where you go, this is a prime opportunity to introduce the idea or think through it from an experiment lens?
I mean, I love these little puppies wherever you can get them in.
There is no bad spot. Okay.
There is no bad time to give a puppy. So if it's a review
I actually
meeting,
do
right?
not believe that whatsoever. There are definitely bad. As a dad of 3 kids, there is a bad time to give a puppy. Please continue.
You'll really like my Valentine's Day gift that's headed to you. The idea that hey, you're in a monitoring meeting, you know that your client's doing pretty good and they're feeling good, nothing's really wrong. Again, you could just kind of have like a normal monitoring meeting, or you could say, let's kind of like, everything's good, you're on track, like things are sweet. What do you want to do in like the next 6 months? Like if you could just try something, you want to go somewhere, have you been thinking about changing something, like what is it? And just get them to try something.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, if they're on track, if they're meeting their other goals, there's no reason why you can't help them to develop a short-term goal or encourage them to pursue some aspect of a larger goal, right now, and I think that there's real benefit in that. So it's not like it has to be used at any particular time or for any particular challenge. It can be used. And again, the more that you do it, the more that clients will get used to this idea. And, by the time they would be in retirement or something like that, they might actually be a lot better at kind of experimenting their way forward.
So I think based on some of the things that I've read from what you put out there, I think it is important, let's call it important. How you frame it and introduce it, I think, is maybe the most important part of, like, yes, you want to get to the point where you go, hey, well, let's think about what are some tests you could do. But how would you let's say you're in a meeting where you're doing the monitoring. So maybe it's a review meeting. How would you recommend introducing or like describing this idea of experiments? How would you frame it so that they know like what's going on here?
Well, I mean, the fact that there's a book out, that's called Tiny Experiments, I don't know how advisors actually feel about this, but I have heard an advisor say this before, and I thought that it was one of the best things that I've ever heard an advisor say when they're trying to like introduce a new idea. They said, as an advisor, hey, you know that I'm always doing like education and stuff, to get better at my work, to get better at my job, to get better at, being able to serve you. And I recently listened to a podcast, read a book, went to a conference, whatever you did. And I came back with this idea. And like, if you're game, I would really like to talk to you about it. I've been thinking, because you were coming in about your plan. And I know that in retirement, you talked about wanting to be more involved in your community. I love this. But I was thinking you don't have to wait like until retirement. And so I thought that before we get to retirement, what if we set a goal like in the next 6 months, to kind of try something? So like if you had to try something, like what would you try? Like when you think about that, like being involved in your community, what is it like? What do you picture? And, maybe they'll say something like, well, I envision, being on a board of the local museum. I don't know. And you're like, well, okay. Like you could do that now, or you could at least like join a committee. Would you want to do something like that? Like it doesn't, all you got to do is kind of bring up the conversation. And I think that talking about it in the way that like, I work really hard to be good at my job. And like, here's the thing that I recently learned, and I would love to share it with you.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's
always well received. Yeah, that's good. I like that. Yeah. And it's like, I'm always trying to improve, always trying to be better. Here's something that I've started doing that works well. Right. Yeah. I think that's always a good way to frame it. Or like sometimes I've heard people say like, all right, so I'm in this when they feel fear around it. They're like, all right, so I'm a part of this group or part of this coaching group. And one of the things that they're asking us to do is this, right? So it like puts the pressure. Like I had a friend actually reach out to me and he's like, hey, I'm in this group. And one of the exercises is to reach out to a friend to get to see how they see you so you can get better, become more self-aware, right? It wasn't like, hey, will you fill this out for me? He's like, hey, I'm doing this because of this. Do you mind doing it? It's like the framing of it really does matter. And the article that you wrote, I thought there's a great example of like how you can even describe it in a non-experimental, how you could introduce the concept, the same concept in two different ways. So you could say, you could spend a little bit more on this trip. You should start flying business class. You've earned it and you can afford it. And like, that's probably true. That's not bad, right? Or you could go the more of an experimental framing or approach and say, hey, what if we try business class just for your next Europe trip? We can bake it into a one-time budget. And if you don't enjoy it, you never have to do it again. And it may seem like a subtle difference. If we tested it, we did the research, I'm going to guess that the uptake through the second framing is maybe not significantly higher, but it's higher, right? Because it lowers the barrier to doing it. You're like, hey, and by the way, if you hate it, we'll never do it again.
Right. I think it's more than permission. It's not like, hey, you can fly business class, you should do it. It's you're like putting a plan in place by demonstrating that it's an experiment.
Yeah, right.
And that just little bit of planning, that little bit of like, this is what we can try, and like, hey, you don't ever have to do it again. That can relieve so many pressures and like, just again, weird things that people think, because people will think things like, oh, well, if I fly business class and I like it, then I'm going to fly business class for the rest of my life, and then I'm going to go broke. Like, they think all these, it's like one snowball problem after another. But if you're just like, but like, we could just try it like just this one time and just see how it goes, people kind of relax a little bit, and they can tell a little bit more that you've thought about it. It doesn't sort of much feel like a off the cuff, like, hey, yeah, you could do that. Like, this is like, you can do this. I thought about it. Let's just try it. That sounds a little bit more convincing, sounds a little bit more stable, I think, than just you're not being flippant, but like, it can sometimes come off like that when you're just, saying things offhandedly, like, hey, you should try this.
Right. So instead they should say, so I just listened to this amazing podcast with two brilliant people and they suggested that. All right. It sounds like, based on what you said and what the research shows, is that a good experiment is only as good as the debrief and the reflection that's done. So, and you talked through that a little bit when you went through that step, the debrief step, but are there any particular or specific questions that you like or would recommend, or somebody could use even as like a guide to get an idea of what those questions could sound like to help somebody go through a debrief?
I'm pretty sure that I put some in the Kitsis article that I wrote. Chances are high. But, in my mind, like the big thing is, like, you don't just want them to only talk about what they liked. You also do want to actively ask them about what they did not like, and especially it's if, for example, it was about the flights, like you got them to do business class, ask them about it. Like, don't just be like, how was it? Like, ask them about that specific thing,
point.
Especially something that you want them to repeat. I think that so, both good and bad, you want to get them, you want to ask them, like, what do you want to take away from this? Like, when you think about, what you want to do next, what feels most salient, what feels most important for you to try or for you to continue to do, or for you to do differently, that like you want to try to get at, what do we want to change? What do we want to keep the same? Or, what did we like? What did we not like? Just so that it's not just like, oh yeah, it was so wonderful. Like, in order to keep it going, you have to get nuance. And so you're trying to ask questions that invite nuance, deliberation, change from what happened before.
Yeah, well, you pretty much nailed all the ones that were listed that you'd put out in the article.
Okay.
But what wasn't in the article that I think is a great point is coming back to, if there's a specific thing or a main thing or a main barrier, like just making sure you know that and addressing that specifically, like the business class flights, for example, right? Maybe it wasn't just the 2-week trip. Maybe it's like, hey, but all right, you're worried about those business class flights. What do you think? What do you think? You going to do that moving forward? Was it overrated? And they're like, yeah, not only did we like it, we're going first class next time. You're like, all right, that's good. Or they're like, yeah. So, but either way, but good point. It's like the experiments are only as good as the debrief, but the debrief's only as good as the information that you take from it that helps you move in a better direction moving forward. That helps you, it's a guide for what to do even moving forward based on what you learn from the debrief.
Right. That you're just always iterating. You're always iterating, and it's not good or bad. It's just information about what's going to happen next, or to inform. Mm-hmm.
Anything else? I have one more thing to add that's a little bit outside what we're talking about, and then we'll do the rapid fire 3-pack, which for you is actually just a 1-pack because you've had the question so many times. But before we do that, anything else in particular that we need to know or talk about around the process, or what advisors need to know when working with clients and introducing the idea or talking about experiments?
This comes from a different article that I wrote, but for me, it's like around the same idea, that you don't have to be good to try. You don't have to be good to start. Like there will be people that you meet. I mean, for example, in my own life, I love tile. I think that tile is just like so beautiful. And I travel around Europe taking pictures of tile. And the other day, one like my friends was even like, yeah, you're always taking pictures of your shoes. And I'm like, it's not my shoes. I'm taking pictures of, it is literally the tile, people. And so I told myself, living here over in Italy, that like, I'm not going to leave Europe without learning to make tile. But like, I don't know how to make tile. I didn't even take a ceramics class in high school, like nothing. But I just feel that being artistic and trying something different, and this is like important to me. Like, it's the vision. The vision is that I have these like artsy fartsy things that I do when I'm in my 80s. But like, there isn't anything artsy fartsy that I do. So I was like, damn it, I need to figure something out. I need to set a goal that I'm going to try this stuff. I'm going to like be a tile maker and be a ceramicist. That's my goal. But now I need to like experiment my way. Do I like bowls? Do I like just making tiles? Do I like to paint it? Do I just like to do the stamp part? Like, I didn't know what I was going to like. And I don't have to be good at it to get started. Like, it's okay to totally suck, and potentially you will still enjoy the process. It is okay to like not quite know what you like and don't like. Don't let that hold you back, because it does. It holds a lot of people back. People say all the time that they want to learn an instrument, or that they, want to go back to school for philosophy. Maybe that one's just me, but like, there's like things that people want to do, and they just continue to put them off because they think that, they're not good enough to start. But like, nobody is good when they start. And for financial planners, like, maybe you're not going to be the best at having a conversation about experiments, and like, you're going to kind of experiment your way forward, and it's comfortable for you, but that doesn't mean don't do it. Just because it feels different doesn't mean it's wrong. Like, sometimes things are just different until they're not. And you learn a little bit something about yourself or about what you enjoy. And that's the whole point.
I love how you just did that at the end. It's like, by the way, you're going to have to experiment your way into introducing experiments. Experiments. There's a quote that I like that I felt like hit home for me around this whole idea of experiments, which was, you act your way into clarity rather than waiting for clarity to act, which hit home for me because I know like my tendency is like, all right, as soon as the clarity clicks, then I'm going to act, right? And it keeps me from acting because I don't get the clarity. And so this is probably just a little bit of like my own therapy here, just sitting there going, hey, okay, you don't wait for clarity, act your way into clarity. Don't wait for clarity to act. I thought that was good. Here's the thing I was going to say for anybody that's listening. We're thinking about this through the lens of client interactions and the client experience and working with clients and helping them spend more or give to charity or save more, whatever it is. But I think underlying all of this, and maybe there's some people out there that already thought about this, but I think where this is equally as applicable is when you think about your advisor marketing and business development. And the reason I say that is because as you were sitting here explaining the experiment thing, I had this flashback to whenever I first wanted to start the podcast, right? I'm like, hey, I listen to podcasts. I like podcasts. Like, maybe I'll start my own podcast, right? And so I went and I sat down with a guy that had his own podcast in the dentist space, had been doing it for a while. And so I was just asking him like, hey, what should I do? Like, trying to get a feel for how to do it. Also procrastinating a little bit, but it was helpful procrastination. And so
yeah, you were still doing something, not just thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. It was acting Yeah, I was still procrastinating, but it was at least moving me in the right direction. So, but I remember what he said, that he told me something that was like really helpful and powerful. And so it's the advice I give to anybody that comes to me now and says, hey, should I start a podcast? He was like, before you do it, sit down with a mic and record 3 episodes and see if you like it or not. It's like, just try it, record 3. You don't even have to put them out into the world. Just go through the process of what it takes to do it. And if that feels like not enjoyable, or it feels like a grind in any way, it probably means it's hard to continue doing something you don't like. And so if you do those 3 and you like it, I think that's informative. You do the 3 and it's a grind, don't do it anymore. And so I say that to say, and so I did it and I was like, freaking love this. And so here we are almost 6 years later. But when it comes to marketing, advisors are always like, okay, should I do this? Should I do that? I want to start a podcast. I'm going to do a blog. I'm going to start. And I think we can apply the same idea, right? Which is like, 100%, hey, we get all this pressure to go, okay, need to grow. I want to make this work. I've got to pick the right thing, right? I got to nail it. I've got to like, there's one avenue. I've got to nail it. I think it's good to give ourselves permission to go, hey, you can experiment your way into figuring out what you like, which is really important, but then also B, like what actually works. So maybe you sit there and you go, I hate networking, or like going out and meeting people. It's like, well, maybe you really probably do, right? But at least go try it 3 times.
Well, I can bring this full circle for us right now, because for years, so maybe some of you listening don't realize that Brendan and I have been friends for a while. And a long time ago, you were like, Megan, you should do more social media. And I'm pretty sure I said something like, social media is not for me. I really do not enjoy it. Like, it mostly just makes me want to die. And you were like, no, but you could do so many things. And I'm like, no. But last year, I told myself, okay, Brendan's told me, Michael's told me, people that are important to me in my life that I trust they keep telling me the same thing. So instead of just flat out like refusing or just saying that I can't, then I'm gonna try different things to figure out like what feels less bad when it comes to social media. And I will have this is honestly, I would 100% credit you to this. I went from 3,000 people, maybe 4,000 people that follow me, to now I have over 10,000. And it's not necessarily because I was I found things that I felt comfortable with in terms of like how I shared my research, how I shared my writing, how I shared my ideas that did not feel ick to me. And I just continued to do it consistently. But I had to experiment a lot with that. And I continue to do that now, because there's also like, in terms of experimenting, what I felt comfortable doing, and then like what people would actually look at, and so there was a balance of, and this is where that, debriefing part comes in, that, okay, what did I enjoy? What did other people enjoy? And like, is there like a Venn diagram of things not horrible and things that people actually like? And you find enough of those, you can grow and do. And so I went through this exact thing last year, or a year and a half ago, I guess at this point. And
so follow us on LinkedIn is what you're saying. Is that what we're getting at? Yeah.
You can. That would be great. I would appreciate that. And to your point though, about marketing and trying to figure out what to do, like, you don't have to be all things to all people. You can find a way to like make it feel good and real to you, and to lean into that, but use that debrief process. Talk to people that, to your point, that are doing what you think you might want to do, and learn about, like what metrics and how they think about what they think about, so that then you can run a better debrief for yourself on what's working and what's not working, and what can I continue to do consistently that doesn't feel like it's killing me.
Yeah, no, that's all right. We're going to move into the rapid fire 1-pack of questions, because you've answered the other ones so many times at this point. It's a new concept. The last guest is passing a question along to the current guest. So the last guest we had on, you probably know her. Actually, I know you know her. Episode 149, Turning Financial Plans into Purpose-Driven Lives, with Emily Rassam. You know Emily, I believe.
Oh, yes, I do.
Here's Emily's question.
know it was going to be
No,
me?
she did not know. No.
Okay.
You don't know who it's going to be. You just got to come up with the best question you can. She said she wants to know, share the last time you asked a question or made an observation that created a light bulb moment for the other person. And why do you think it resonated so strongly with them? And if you have any issue with this question, you can take it up with Emily.
I'm a caller. I recently, my husband said something, or I said something, and my husband was like, "Oh, that was really good." So we have 2 kids. Our older one is a little more dominant. Like when it's her show, it's only her show. And we were talking about going to Disneyland. And he was like, we should go for her birthday. And I was like, we should not go for her birthday. And he was like, why? It'd be so fun. It'd be so memorable. And I'm like, right, but it would only be about her. There would be no family fun. It would just be fun for Leona. And so since we have 2 children, he looked at me and he was like, yeah, you're right. that would definitely happen. Good thinking. And I was like, yes, go team. So we are going to Disneyland Paris, but it is not happening anywhere near Leona's birthday.
And it was the 3rd time that day that you gave him a light bulb moment.
No, it's pretty rare actually that my husband's like, oh, that's a good idea.
All right, all right, fair enough. Or maybe he thinks it, he just doesn't always say it out loud. We'll go with that.
I'm definitely going to go with that. That's 100%.
All right. So as we wrap up, if anybody wants to, I'll link to the articles, right? So they can find them and go dive deeper. But if they want to find you, because you've made some moves since we first started this whole thing. You're found in some different places. If anybody goes, hey, I like what Meghan's about, we've already talked about LinkedIn, but where else can they go to find you, follow you, and join the fan club?
So I work with Shaping Wealth. We have Lydia is probably the most exciting thing going on right now at Shaping Wealth. Lydia is our AI, and it's really cool. Like I'm certainly a tech optimist. I don't believe that like we're all going to turn into paper clips or something like that. But I don't always know or feel as positively as and Lydia is really, really cool. And so if you're interested in like what that would look like, Lydia is almost like almost like talking to me or talking to Joy or talking to Brian or talking to Neil, three other partners at Shaping Wealth. And like you can ask her, Lydia, questions about, my clients coming in, they're a little bit nervous, what should I do? You can role play with Lydia. You can talk to Lydia. Lydia will give you lots of ideas. It's pretty slick. At Beyond the Plan, I work with Ashley Kwame, who Ashley's totally been on your show. Brian's been on your show. I feel like all the cool kids been on the show. Ashley and I are putting together cool. Like the thing that's been really fun lately thinking with Ashley is we've decided that we want to create like some client facing tools. And so whether it's, how to have a talk about what you want to invest, like the type of charity that you want, or a values conversation, or we've got all of these like ideas cooked up that could be done by the client independently, but also could be facilitated by the advisor. And that has been so fun to think about. Another super cool thing that we are doing at Beyond the Plan is we're working with firms that want to partner in order to offer financial therapy. And so if you are one of those advisors that think, man, it'd be so nice if my retired client or my coupled client or this client that's just going through a big transition, like had somebody else to talk to about some of this stuff, maybe to get at, some of that vision, maybe to put together, a couple of experiments, Beyond the Plan would be open for business. And then always doing some cool stuff with Marla at Nomi. It's like a tech version of all of this. It helps with the behavioral and sort of discovery side. Really enjoyed doing the advising work there. And then always hanging out with Derek Notman at Coupler as well, which is mostly for larger firms. I mean, if you've got more than 6 advisors in your firms, you probably could use Coupler. Instead of the creepy way to get leads that nobody likes anyway, Coupler actually tries to connect you based on relationship attributes and like what you might actually have in common with this person, to not only help you have like a better first conversation, but to also provide a little support for like what actually makes relationships work.
And less lonely money.
Oh yeah, and less lonely money, where I write for myself, and I feel like it's on this one of these episodes where it was first uncovered that I did not like small talk, and so it's probably fair to say that here soon, April, there will be an article on small talk if anybody cares about that.
All right, well, I think you've officially done it. Number 5 is in the books. You're one away from matching Jordan and getting to number 6. I'm sure there'll be an article soon or something soon where I'll go, okay, it's time to have her back, and we'll celebrate at that point. But
you better have me back to talk about small talk.
That's probably going to be the one. There's no better one to be number 6 than small talk. So
it would have to be. Oh man, that would be so epic, but also so horrible. So
right, well,
yeah,
everybody be looking forward to that. Meghan, thanks for joining as always, and keep doing awesome work.
Yeah.
Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice, nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of the guest. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. The commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by the guest or RFG Advisory or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change anytime without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. The guest and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.